Boa noite, pessoal! Boa noite! Tudo bem com vocês? Estamos mais um dia, nosso segundo dia de live aqui, pré-Encontro Internacional de Ensino de Idiomas. Mas antes da gente começar, eu poder apresentar a professora que está aqui com a gente, confirmar se o nosso áudio está ok, se o nosso vídeo também está bem e nos ouvem bem. Vocês querem colocar aqui nos comentários. Oi, Vera, tudo bem? Olha, a Vera tá por aí. Lembro da carinha da Vera, de muitos dos nossos eventos. Tudo bem, Vera? Como que você tá?
Olá,
Vocês
todo
conseguem ouvir a
mundo.
gente bem? Mandem um aqui. Ixi, meu áudio tá travando um pouquinho. Deixa eu trocar aqui o Wi-Fi, então. Vocês estão conseguindo me ouvir? Ai, que bom.
Hello,
Bom,
Karen.
gente. Ai, a Karen, knowledge. Bom, pessoal, vou começar aqui então só com alguns recadinhos, tá bom? Antes de passar a palavra para a professora. Ontem a gente teve a nossa primeira live com a Bruna Shimabuko. Tá aqui no nosso canal, quem quiser assistir, dá para rever. Ela falou sobre o mercado de atuação de PLE no mundo. Então, é de português para estrangeiros, né? E aí, se vocês quiserem dar uma olhadinha lá, tá lá ainda, tá bom? E hoje estamos aqui com a professora Jane Coury, excelentíssima professora, também professora aqui da Faculdade Forte, de graduação e de pós-graduação, né, Pro? Professora tá, cheia de aula aí para dar, tanto na graduação quanto na pós, né, Pro?
Isso mesmo.
Queridíssima aqui por nós, por todos os alunos também. E, bom, antes de... vocês não querem me ouvir aqui, né? Vocês querem ouvir a professora, mas tem um recadinho super importante, tá? Que é sobre a troca da data do encontro. Como vocês sabem, a gente está fazendo um esquenta pré-evento, só que ele mudou a data, tá? Ele agora vai acontecer no dia 2 de março, anotem aí, dia 2 de março, totalmente online, tá? Como muitas pessoas querem, né, acompanhar o evento, é um dia inteirinho cheio de palestra, são 4 salas com palestras voltadas tanto para professor de inglês, para professor de espanhol, professor de português para estrangeiros, e também tem as palestras gerais também, para todos, né, todos os idiomas aí. Então, tá muito imperdível, vocês precisam participar desse evento, é um valor simbólico também, a gente vai manter no valor de R$40 o evento, então o link está aqui na descrição, para quem ainda não garantiu o convite para o evento. Se vocês tiverem alguma dúvida quanto às datas, o horário e tudo mais, podem mandar mensagem lá para a gente no WhatsApp, o WhatsApp também está aqui na descrição, mas o horário vai continuar o mesmo, tá? O evento vai começar às 9 e vai até o finalzinho da tarde. Tá bom, pessoal? Bom, então deixa eu aqui apresentar devidamente a nossa queridíssima Jane Coury, que é mestra, né, em Linguística Aplicada e TESOL pela Leicester University, tá certo, Pro? A universidade lá do Reino Unido? Leicester. Ai, Leicester. Colocando inglês em prática aqui. Ela também tem experiência em revisão e versão em inglês para publicação de artigos acadêmicos em ciências exatas e humanas, em revistas científicas, internacionais, congressos, além também de ser revisora de revistas acadêmicas. Ela também é autora de livros, né, Pro? A professora é autora do livro Exercícios para Falar Melhor em Inglês, Speaking Activities, 4 Short Stories to Use in ELT Classroom, E também ela é coautora de Help. Preciso de atividades para as minhas aulas. Ó, tudo focado no professor, né, Pro?
Isso mesmo.
Das aulas. Sucesso. E também, além, de toda essa bagagem aí, tem quase 40 anos, né, de experiência aí na área do teaching, né, Pro? E também é professora, como eu falei, aqui da graduação e da pós-graduação da Faculdade Forte. Na graduação, ela dá aula de inglês para tradutores e práticas de tradução também em versão. E na pós-graduação, ela dá aula no curso de pós-graduação de tradução de inglês, ensino de língua inglesa e suas literaturas, e lá vai, né, Pro? Tem muita bagagem por aí. Então, eu deixo vocês com ela. Tem muito aqui a agregar a gente. E, Pro, passo a palavra para você.
Muito
Boa palestra.
obrigada, Carol.
Até mais, pessoal.
Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to this live today, and I'd like to thank Forti and Coury as well, and also Carol for introducing me and for introducing all the lives. And it's so nice to see so many of you here. I know some of you, right? Hello, Danny, and who else is here? Natalia, Cho, I think, I'm not sure about the pronunciation, Vera, Karin, hello, Karin, Danny, Mari, and some other people as well. So I'd like to give you a warm welcome to this live today. Okay. Carla, hello, Carla. Lovely to see you. And Rebecca, hi, how are you doing? So we are going to talk about practicing mindfulness in language learning and teaching tonight. I'm not sure if you know much about mindfulness. It doesn't matter if you don't. Today we're going to learn more about it and see how it can be applied in language learning and teaching. Okay, so let's get started. So first of all, let's talk about what mindfulness means. So here we have a statue of the Buddha, which is in India, in a museum in India, in Uttar Pradesh, which is in the south of India. And the word Sachi, which comes from Buddhism, is really mindfulness. So Sachi was translated to mindfulness by someone in 1881, and I'm not sure if that is really the correct translation, but depending on where you are, it may change a little bit. Okay. But it originally originated from ancient Eastern and Buddhist philosophy. Okay, so I don't know if you know much about the Buddha, Siddhartha, but there's a beautiful book called Old Path, White Clouds. If you're interested, it's a very nice book to read about the Buddha's life. And it tells you all about his story. And he was the founder of Buddhism. So he came from a very rich family. He was a prince, and he was kind of enclosed inside his kingdom. And then one day he ventured out and he saw an ill person by the side of the road. He saw a poor person by the side of the road, and he saw a dead person. And then he said, well, I didn't know this life existed. There is a lot of suffering outside my kingdom, outside my palace. Okay. And he wanted to learn more about suffering and about life, really, because he was very, very much in a bubble. And so he ventured out, and he actually he was actually married and he had kids, or he had a wife and he had kids, and he left them to discover everything about religious teaching and mindfulness, basically. So he stayed under a tree for 49 days until he had an insight. And insights are to do with mindfulness. So here you can see Buddha more in the meditation position. So meditation does have to do, of course, with mindfulness, but we're going to learn more about what it really has to do with your mind, with self-awareness, because it's not really, kind of, I'm going to switch off and go to another planet kind of thing and ignore everybody, right? It's more than that, okay? So John Kabat-Zinn, who you may know, is a professor emeritus of medicine at the University of Massachusetts. And he wrote this book. He wrote loads of books, but there's one called Wherever You Go, There You Are. And I think he has a good, simple definition of what mindfulness means in the West. Okay, so mindfulness, he says, is awareness that arises through paying attention on purpose in the present moment, but non-judgmentally. Okay, I'll just read that again so you can really get it. Mindfulness is awareness that arises through paying attention on purpose in the present moment, non-judgmentally. Okay, so here I am talking to you, and I am in the present moment at 8:13 in the evening in Brazil, and I'm paying attention because I'm giving this live, and I'm paying attention on purpose because I want to do a good job. Okay, and I'm trying not to be non-judgmental of myself. So this non-judgmental can mean about yourself, or it can mean about other people. Okay, so sometimes we can be hard on ourselves, right? Oh, I wonder if I'm going to be able to do this live tonight, or I wonder if I'm going to be able to do that test tomorrow. Okay, but if you think about it, when we say things like that, when we verbalize things like that, we're not in the present moment. We are thinking about the future. Our mind is racing ahead. Okay. So during the pandemic, I did a course at Puki about education. And in the course, there was a module on mindfulness, and I loved it. And I got very into it, and I did my TCC on it. And one of the teachers was this woman called Tamara Russell, who's British, and she's the director of the Mindfulness Center of Excellence in London. And I like what she says about mindfulness. She says loads of things, but this particular definition, if you like. So look at the picture of the man. He has fallen over and he's stubbed his toe. So stubbed his toe, like he hit it and it's really hurting. Okay. So she says body awareness increases when we trip over. Okay, because it hurts, right? My toe hurts, perhaps my back hurts. And our reaction to, for example, stubbed toe could take us away from that particular present moment. Why? Because this man, for example, might be thinking, will I be able to go dancing tonight with my girlfriend, for example? Or if he's thinking in the past, did anyone see me trip over? Okay, so if this happens, we are not really fully present because reactivity and judgment have taken over. Okay, and because he has this pain, this suffering, he can really feel it in his body. All right. So I'm going to ask you a question now, and I'd really like you to write your answer in the chat. I know that some of you might be students, and I know that some of you might be teachers, and I know that some of you might be both. Okay. So I'd like you to tell me, if you could write in the chat, what are some possible distractions that take you away from the present moment when you are teaching or learning? Could you write some things? Hello, Dilemando. Great to see you. And Jo, hello. Natalia. Okay, so think about some possible distractions that take you away from the present moment. Okay, Rebecca said problems. That's a good one, Rebecca. Right. So, Rebecca, do you think problems relate to the future or the past, or both? Okay, so Sandra, hello, Sandra. Worries about life outside the classroom. Okay, we all have that, don't we? We all have families, a life outside the classroom, other activities. So yeah, Natalia says, students are very difficult today. Will I be able to finish the lesson I'd planned? Okay. Hi, Larissa. Rebecca says the past when she talks about problems. So Sandra says, generally future worries. Okay. And Karen says, everyday life worries. Right. Okay, so routine things, perhaps everyday things. Okay. So we have a lot of worries, problems, these kind of words that are coming up. And they sometimes take over, don't they? Focus on the cell phones, Vera? Do you mean the students? Or the teacher? Okay, Karen also says students' questions may not answer. Students may not answer right away. Okay. Okay. Mm-hmm. Right. We're gonna talk about that later, Karen. Okay. So you were talking about cell phones, Vera. Have a look at this cartoon. I finally realized it. People are prisoners of their phones. That's why they are called cell phones. That's a funny one, right? So what kind of things may distract you? Perhaps thinking about the future or past, as you said, maybe worries, problems. Maybe cell phone messages, because our cell phone constantly beeps or rings during the whole day. And sometimes we may think, oh, it might be important. And sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. But if you're like me, I tend to look at all the messages that are coming in. It's my New Year's resolution to balance that. Okay, perhaps you get distracted by the doorbell or the phone ringing if you are working at home, or even a family member wanting attention if you're teaching online. Challenging students, as somebody said earlier. External noises, so perhaps there's a building site outside, or there's a lawnmower, somebody's cutting the grass, things that are out of your control. Yeah. So we have many, many distractions throughout the day. okay, that take us away from the present moment. Now, I want you to imagine you are teaching a group of adults online if you are a teacher. If you are a student, imagine you're on the other side on this computer screen, and I'm going to ask you a question. How many seconds would you wait for your students to answer an open-ended question you asked in an online course? So if you could write in the chat, it would be great. An open-ended question means that the student will not give a yes/no answer, right? They will hopefully give an extended answer because of your question. So for example, if I say, did you go to the beach last weekend? The answer is going to be yes or no. But if I say, oh, tell me about your last holiday, then the person would have to give me at least one sentence. Okay. So Carolina said 1 second. Carolina, seconds. Okay. Oh, you imagine minutes. 1 minute is the most that you would wait. Okay. Sandra, a few seconds probably. All right. Anyone else? Okay. Well, perhaps at least 10 to 15 seconds. This is my opinion, right? But you might have another opinion. And I see that Sandra says the silence is disturbing. So this is a very interesting issue, a very interesting question, right? Yes, Natalia. So we have to take into account the delay and the time to think over the answer. And as I have on the slide here, they have to think of another answer in another language. And they also have to pluck up courage. So they have to get the courage, the confidence to answer in front of the teacher and their classmates in another language and unmute themselves, right? So all of that is going to take time. Now, going back to this question about silence is disturbing, I think that's very interesting. I've been with you for 24 minutes so far, and I have had a couple of silences because that's my way, I think, of being. So I'm from the UK, and in the UK, silence is very normal, let's say. But you can have different kinds of silences, right? You can have like a healthy silence where somebody might be thinking, or you might have an awkward silence where it's a very uncomfortable situation, or you can have different kinds, right? Now, how about in Brazil? What do you think if you waited 15 seconds? Would that be weird in an online class? Okay. You see, I waited, 10 seconds? And then somebody answered. I was just about to, I was getting a bit kind of nervy here, thinking, no. But that's what mindfulness is all about, right? Thinking about what you asked and how long it might take for people to answer. And quite a few of you have answered now. So Natalia says, you think it would be okay? Carolina, yes, in an online class. So 10, 15 seconds is okay. Your opinion. Vera, 20 seconds. Yeah, Rebecca, you probably wouldn't count. Yeah, I don't think I would either. It seems the lack of face-to-face interaction demands communication all the time. Now that's interesting, Sandra. So you think that the online lessons are different to the face-to-face because online lessons demands more communication. Interesting. Okay, so there is an expression in English: silence can be golden. All right, Sandra. Okay, yeah, it's different teaching face-to-face and teaching online. Definitely. Okay, now I'm sure that many of you have students who are anxious. Maybe if you're a learner, you might have a teacher who's anxious, and maybe yourself, you might be anxious or not, right? But we are living in an era where anxiety is at the forefront, let's say. Okay. Let me just go back to Natalia. You've been trying to practice this silence when asked a question outside the classroom environment. You tend to rush to answer and mess up things. It's happened quite a few times. Ah, okay. Right. Okay, well, it's good that you're self-aware, Natalia, because mindfulness has to do with self-awareness as well. So going back to anxiety, sometimes when people get anxious, a number of things may happen to them psychologically or physically. So they may have racing thoughts. They may think about the future before it's even here, right? So worrying about what might happen tomorrow, next week, and it could be completely different. Perhaps their speech is faster or slower, depending on many different factors. Or they might just stop talking and completely block up. They may experience a dry mouth, irregular breathing, sweating, or an increased heart rate. They may say the first thing that comes into their head. And if they're in an online lesson, they may turn their camera off. Okay. So some of those things we can recognize more in a face-to-face lesson. For example, perhaps irregular breathing, sweating. Okay, so remember we have 5 senses, and the information that we receive from the world comes through our 5 senses. Okay, so when you're in a face-to-face situation, you can see, you can hear, you can use all your 5 senses: touch, listening, etc. Okay, but when you're online, it's more limited, isn't it? You can see, and sometimes you can see too much, right? Because you've got your face right up to the screen, right? You can even see the pores in your face. And I think it's more difficult to detect irregular breathing. But you can't smell, you can't touch. And of course you can hear, but it's different, isn't it? In the classroom, sometimes people are talking at the same time as they do online as well, but it's a different acoustic, let's say. Okay. Sandra, when you are teaching online and stop talking for some time, students questioned, is a connection bad? Okay. Well, maybe they have to get used to this new way if that's how you want to, if this is what you want to adopt, Sandra. Okay. So mindfulness has to do with self-awareness. Okay. When we are calm and breathing properly, and really getting in touch with ourselves, we can become more self-aware, and we can understand how we act and react in certain situations, and how we could become less anxious if we are anxious as a teacher or a learner. So if you think that you're anxious, what can you do as a teacher or a learner to be less anxious in the classroom? Breathe. That's right. Great one. We can't forget to breathe. Danny says she knows these symptoms very well. I used to forget the words because of anxiety. Okay, right. That's happened to me before when I'm speaking Portuguese or even English. Maybe prepare for class. That is a fantastic piece of advice, Rebecca. I think preparation is everything. If we're prepared, we're more confident, and we are prepared for anything that might not go as planned. Sandra, slow down. Good. Right, slow down maybe in your speaking, maybe in your actions, maybe in terms of not doing 6 things at once as we normally do nowadays, right? Multitasking. Because basically, let's face it, if we do 6 things at once, they're not going to be done well. Anything else? Perhaps call for help when learning a new language online. Yeah, great one. Very good. We can always call for help. And some people like it when you ask them for help. Okay, anything else? Okay. So, let's talk a little bit about active listening, which is a technique for communication. And this could help you become more present, become more mindful. I don't remember who it was now, but I think it was Danny that said sometimes you answer perhaps too fast, and sometimes even as a teacher we might kind of put words in the mouth of our student because we think we know what they're going to say, but actually we don't. Okay. So active listening means a conscious effort to hear and understand what the other person is saying. So think about that. You really listen or hear and understand what the other person is saying. So, that requires an effort. It requires a lot of effort, actually, because we have many distractions, because we're thinking about the future, because we're thinking about the past, we're thinking about what we're going to have for dinner tonight. And I don't know, but this happens to me quite a lot. I get the key words, but I didn't get the whole story. Does that happen to any of you? So it requires the listener to feed back what they hear to the speaker. And that helps a lot, especially with language learning, because we can kind of disguise corrections and hope the student will pick up the correction. And 2, we're giving them input of perhaps synonyms, if you can, try to give feedback of what you heard, but say it in a different way. So paraphrasing. And also, the most important thing, the listener feels that you are listening. The speaker feels that you are listening. Okay. They feel like they're getting attention. And that's what everybody wants, let's face it. So active listening requires being non-judgmental. Remember, we said that mindfulness has to do with being non-judgmental and not interrupting. Okay, so we hear everything. Maybe we feedback what we hear. We try not to make judgments about their English, the student's English, or what the teacher's saying if you're a learner. Even about what the person looks like or how the person is dressed, right? So we try to take those judgmental views out of our head and kind of go into this conversation as a beginner in terms of we're not judging, because if you are a beginner, you don't know anything about that person, right? So it's like you're meeting that person for the first time, even though you may be not meeting that person for the first time. And you're going into that conversation without any judgment. It also requires putting your own thoughts on hold, okay, and resisting the urge to start planning what you're going to say. So this is very common, isn't it? Somebody says, oh, I have to go to the supermarket to buy some, and then you're like, oh, I have to go to the supermarket too. And then boom, you know, you start planning what you're going to say. Okay, so active listening has to do with just putting your thoughts on hold and resisting the urge to start planning what you're going to say. Hear the person out. Okay. Any thoughts about that? What do you think about active listening? Easier said than done, perhaps? Okay, I'm going to give you an example of a conversation between a teacher and a student where there is no active listening, and then an improvement on how that became active listening. Okay, so imagine you are in a one-to-one lesson, A2 level, and the teacher says, tell me about a holiday you remember well. And the student says, I go on holiday to Rio last week, and so the student's just about to, think about what they're going to say. And the teacher says, oh, Rio, I went there last year. It was wonderful. We went on a boat ride and the food was great. We stayed in a fantastic hotel, but do you know what happened? We and totally ignoring the student, okay? Where in fact the student is paying to practice their English, okay? Yes, Sandra, it's an exercise that should be practiced more often, yeah. And Vera, not exactly, but you're trying to do this and encourage your students to practice and give their opinions freely. Right, Vera. It's not easy, okay? It really isn't easy, because we live in a society where this doesn't happen very much. Okay, let's look at an improved dialogue then. So the teacher says, tell me about a holiday you remember well. The student, I go on holiday to Rio last week and I stayed in a nice hotel. So they managed to finish the phrase. The teacher says, nice. So you went on holiday to Rio. Who did you go with? So here we have the feedback that shows that the teacher's listening. And then the teacher asks an open-ended question, right? Who did you go with? So the student cannot say yes or no. The student has to say, I went with my sister, with my brother, with whoever, okay? Even if they just said sister, they're using English, right? And the teacher may say, interesting, what did you do with your sister there? So the teacher is listening. Okay, sister, another open-ended question. And then go on. So basically, we want our students to have the opportunity to practice as much as possible in the short time that they have for their English lessons every week. And this is one technique that you could use. Now, something that is connected to that is pacing. Now, pacing is terminology from neuro-linguistic programming. And it really means gaining and maintaining rapport with another person over a period of time by joining them in their model of their world, by matching or mirroring their external behavior, which could be their speed of talking or body posture. So let's have a look at that in more detail. First of all, let's think what rapport means. So rapport is having a good relationship with someone. So sometimes you could say, oh, that teacher has good rapport with his or her students. So they have a good relationship, they understand what the students need, and they get on well. Okay. If you look at this picture, there is an adult and a child. They're holding hands, walking through the forest, and they're going at the same pace, right? The same speed of walking, the same rhythm, and they're able to talk to each other, even though one's taller than the other. Now, maybe because the child has shorter legs, the child may lag behind, and then there's no rapport, and there's certainly no pacing. Okay, because one is behind, one is in front, it's a barrier. Okay. Now, pacing can be challenging because sometimes we might have someone who's very slow to formulate a phrase, for example, which is difficult when you have a group of students and everybody's waiting. Or you might have the opposite. Somebody talks a lot and doesn't let anyone else talk. Okay, so rapport also means that you are aware or mindful of how to deal with that situation. For example, when to cut off the chatterbox, but in a polite way. Okay, you're not going to say shut up, right? But you could, for example, back away a little bit, or perhaps turn your head, some kind of body language movement, or even say something like, oh, I must get on now. So it shows the end of the conversation. Okay, so that's to do with rapport. You might have somebody in your class who's autistic, right? And so matching or mirroring their kind of world is trying to understand what their world is and trying to get into their world and see how you can teach them the best way possible. Okay, you might have a disruptive student, either a child, teenager, adult. You can be disruptive at any age, right? And so you may have to think, how am I going to deal with that student, because they're not learning or because they are hindering the others in the classroom. Okay, so that's all to do with mindfulness, really remembering to observe what's going on around you and how to deal with it. Okay. Now, pacing can be challenging when students don't turn on their cameras in an online lesson. Of course it can, because it's a barrier, isn't it? We don't know who's on the other side, or even if they are there on the other side. Okay. But from my experience with online classes, you can pace by doing some things. For example, break the ice. I remember a class that I had that was a course with, I think there were about 5 students online, and only one turned on their camera, the other 4 didn't. Okay. And then I spoke English all the time, but then one day I spoke Portuguese for some reason, and then they completely changed with me because they realized that I understand Portuguese, speak Portuguese, and maybe understand their world a bit. And things changed after that. Some of them still didn't turn on their cameras, and I asked them why. And one said, because their camera was broken. Another said, because my house is a mess. Another said, the children are running around. Okay, so we need to understand why students are not turning their cameras on and not just judge. Remember, mindfulness has to do with judging or not judging. And because we have this tendency, I think, to say, oh, all those students didn't turn their cameras on. Okay, but why not? Maybe because they don't have a camera, maybe because it's broken, whatever. Okay, but we need to understand before we start taking action, right? You can also pace by, of course, building up trust, which has to do with rapport. So when you build up trust with your students, like you correct their work when they give it to you, you give them feedback, you walk the walk, right? So you do what you're going to say, right? I'll come back to you next lesson with that answer. And then the next lesson, you come back with the answer. Otherwise, if you don't have that trust, you won't have rapport. Also, asking questions that do not require just yes or no answers, as we said before, and writing messages to students in the chat, perhaps privately, when you see that a student is not responding or communicating. Okay, and then we can think about the students. Like, if you're a student, why don't you turn on your camera? Is it because of one of these things? Is it because of something else? Would you like to talk to the teacher about it? So rapport is communication. Communication is extremely important. Now, we have 10 minutes, so I just want to show you a few mindfulness activities that you could use in your classroom. Okay, the first one, very simple and very quick. So it's called Click, Clap and Wave for A2, and it gives the students the opportunity to practice the irregular verbs. So you can start off, it can be online or face-to-face, by doing this action: click, clap, and wave. Click, clap, and wave. Okay, so you can see that in the camera, no problem. And then when you click, you say the infinitive, so fly. When you clap, you say the past simple, flew. And when you wave, you say the past participle, flown. So you do that a couple of times with different verbs, so the students get to know the game. And then you just say the infinitive and let them do the rest. So, for example, I could say catch. Okay, so I'm not going to say, but they are going to say. All right, so this is mindful because you're using your body. It's kinesthetic, right? So you're aware. It wakes people up, and it's a great way for students to learn the irregular verbs. Okay, good way to work memory as well, Vera. Exactly, very good, because you've got the movement as well as the word. Okay, another activity that you could do to practice the past simple and the present perfect. So this could be for B1 students upwards, and students could talk about happy and memorable times in their lives. So I would ask my students to go outside and get a leaf, any leaf. Okay, so you're already doing something a bit more alternative, either face-to-face, they go outside, get the leaf, or in an online course, you can say, please bring a leaf next class. Then you ask the students to draw the leaf. So this is also kinesthetic. And make it big so it fills the page. And they should also include details such as the veins and the stem. This is very important because I'll show you why. So you ask the students to write, I was born in, and then the date they were born, or the year, at the base of the leaf. And at the top, they write the current year is 2024. And then you get the students to write some sentences on their drawing to describe some happy and memorable times in their lives. So they could use different colors, for example, red for past simple and green for present perfect. And the present perfect is going to go vertically. Okay, why? Because those lines going out represent dates. Okay, for example, I have lived in my house since 1994, and you can see that I got married in 1994 on the same line. And then before that, I graduated in 1992. And then much before that, when I was 6 years old, I learned how to ride a bike. And then another sentence, I've had my car since 2019, so it's further up, okay? So it's a great way for them to visually see the difference between past simple and present perfect, because your past simple is a finished action. Present perfect, of course, you're relating the past to the present. And after they've done that, you can ask the students to swap their drawings, and the students then ask their partner more questions based on the drawing. For example, oh, I see you've lived in your house since 1994. Where do you live? What's your house like? Do you live in a house or an apartment? Who do you live with? Etc., etc. So it's a way for them to talk to a partner, to get to know another person. Okay. And one more activity for A2 students. Students should be able to form sentences in the present and past, activating their 5 senses. So you can give your students a worksheet, which is similar to this. It doesn't have to be exactly this. And of course, you can do this face-to-face, or you can give them, your students, this to do at home. If you're on an online lesson, bring it next class, okay? So you're going to do this activity outside of the instructions to the student. Please take this worksheet and a pencil with you and follow the instructions and write notes in the spaces after each question. So there's an example. Please go to the front door. What's the door made of? And the answer, the door is made of wood. And then you have some other things like go outside, look around you, name 2 things you can see that are brown and 2 things that begin with the letter G. So they really have to observe, and they have to be mindful about what's going on around them. They have to look up, for example, look up at the sky. They have to close their eyes. What can they hear? Go back to the classroom, touch something, sit down on a chair, etc., etc. So you're using the 5 senses and getting them to observe things, write things down, and then they can swap notes with their partner, and then they can compare their notes with each other using the beginning of these sentences. For example, the front door is made of, I saw, I smelled, I heard, I touched, I felt. So using the past simple here. And obviously, you can help them with vocabulary. Okay. Do you think these activities would help in your classes? Okay, Caroline. Great, okay. And also as a learner, so think about as a learner. Okay, so we're coming to the end. This is just a kind of summary, let's say, and the 7 key attitudes of mindfulness that Jon Kabat-Zinn talks about in his book. So the first one, non-judging, remember. We try to go into things as a beginner. Patience. Patience is a key point. So when we wait for that we wait in the golden silence for the student to answer, remembering that they have to formulate an answer in another language. Maybe they're shy, maybe they have technical issues online. So we have to be patient. As we said, beginner's mind. So we go into a conversation as a beginner, trying not to judge. Trust. Non-striving. So non-striving means simply experiencing the moment in mindfulness. Okay, being there at the moment. Acceptance. So perhaps you think somebody's weird, but that's the way they are. You're not going to change them. It's acceptance. And letting go of some things, right? So often when we judge, why do we judge? Because, I don't know, maybe we want to control things, maybe there are a number of factors, right? But letting go of certain things, and if you get more into what mindfulness is all about in terms of Buddhism, you will see that you let go of desires and material things, for example. Okay, well, maybe you don't have to go that far, but a certain letting go and becoming more self-aware. Now, I just want to tell you about this wonderful podcast. I put the QR code there. It's called The Way Out is In. And the beginning of the podcast, Thich Nhat Hanh takes part, but at the end, he actually died during the podcast. He was a very famous Vietnamese Buddhist monk, a peace activist, historically recognized. There's about 20 episodes, I think, of this podcast, and it takes you all through what mindfulness is, Zen and the art of living, and I really liked it, so I recommend it for those who want to get more into it. But Thich Nhat Hanh said, the most precious gift we can offer is our presence. When mindfulness embraces those we love, they will bloom like flowers. So sometimes just being present and not really saying anything, just nodding, for example, is enough, right? We don't have to interrupt, butt in. Sometimes just the presence is enough. Here is a bibliography. So some books here that you can buy on Amazon. Some of them are free online. So you've got Mindfulness in Motion, Old Path, White Clouds that I was talking about before, which is about the Buddha's life. Atividades com Música was written by Louise Potter. So music, of course, helps a lot in the classroom for people to become very aware. The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. So he's a very big name in mindfulness. Then we've got Jon Kabat-Zinn's book, Energizing Your Classroom, which is by Jane Ravel, very famous in the ELT world. And she's got some wonderful ideas about how to get students up and walking around and all sorts of things. Eco Psychology is a journal, and on Netflix, I don't know if you've seen this, it's called Headspace. It's nice to relax and meditate a bit if that's what you want to do. I've written this article in New Roots from Giselle about reflecting on mindful teaching in online lessons. I just checked before, but I think the QR code is not working. But if you go to my Instagram, which is at Jane Coury, in the link tree, you'll see the article there. Okay. And so also my blog is there, where there are lots of articles and video and many different things. And you've got Cucci Forci site here if you want to know more about undergraduate and postgraduate courses. Okay, so I'd like to thank you very much for coming out tonight. And it was a real pleasure to talk to you online. And I hope that we can meet up soon. Okay, thank you.
Oi, Pro.
Oi, tudo bem?
Tudo jóia? A Carol agradeceu aqui, deixa eu colocar ela para você ver.
Thank you.
Pessoal,
Carol.
Chegamos ao final de mais uma live. Professora, muito, muito obrigada pela sua presença. Tenho certeza que o pessoal gostou bastante. Que bom, né? O pessoal, todo mundo respondendo. E, de fato, aula maravilhosa aqui com você. É um prazer, de novo, ter você aqui com a gente. Não só, né, nas palestras, mas também nas nossas aulas, né, de graduação e de pós-graduação. Muito obrigada de coração mesmo, Pro, por estar participando de mais um evento aqui com a gente.
Muito obrigada, Carol.
E, pessoal, a gente vai ficando por aqui hoje, mas semana que vem a gente tem mais algumas lives para fazer o esquenta pré-evento, tá? Na semana que vem a gente vai começar a live na segunda-feira com a Meg de Oliveira. Ela é uma, né, das pessoas que trabalham lá dentro da Bridge. Ela vai falar sobre a presença da Bridge nas universidades do mundo também, né? Então vai ser bem legal a palestra dela, bastante focado também em quem dá aula de inglês. Então, para quem está aqui, pessoal, não percam também a live de segunda-feira, que vai acontecer aqui através dos nossos canais também mesmo, às 20 horas, tá bom? E a palestra da professora Jane vai ficar disponível para vocês assistirem também novamente, tá bom? Quantas vezes vocês precisarem, porque foi uma aula aqui, né? Não foi, né, uma palestra, foi uma aula. Professora, não brinque em serviço. Obrigada, Vera. Vera é uma fofa.
E concordo com a Vera, você é uma fofa.
Imagina. Pessoal, muito, muito obrigada novamente pela presença de todos aqui. E uma boa noite, Pro. Um beijão para você, viu?
Tá bom, boa noite.
Boa
Tchau,
noite.
tchau.
Boa noite, pessoal. Tchau, tchau. Até segunda-feira, hein? Anotem aí, às 20 horas. Até mais.
Tchau.